Hey, I'm so excited to be joined here by James Powell, who is the author of the House of Fear series published by Dark Horse, along with many other books. And he's also an independent editor and writing coach who works with fiction writers across prose and comics. He's also run 9 Kickstarter campaigns, and that's why we're talking today, because you have a Kickstarter coming up for a really interesting book, which I'm excited to get into. But I kind of want to start with you, James, by going way back. We know each other sort of well. We've gotten to know each other. But I've never heard you tell me how you got into stories in the first place. Like as a kid, I'm going to assume that you liked to read. But tell
Absolutely.
me about that.
So as I pretty much read nonstop as a kid. I read comics, I read prose. One of my earliest memories was a Scholastic school fair when I was in 6th grade, and I had a couple of bucks, and I bought an Edgar Rice Burroughs book and a Stephen King. And seriously, I devoured that in a weekend, and I was off to the races. And then
Stephen
actually
King
that
was in
same
the.
year, now I think about it, I wrote a story for class, and a teacher told me that it read like a screenplay for a movie. And it was just something about her praise in that moment, because I was really into this story I had written. And ever since, I just want to write all the time. or,
Wow.
or read, obviously, too. So
I'm amazed that you were getting Stephen King in the Scholastic Book Fair because I don't think they would do that anymore.
probably not. And it was Carrie, the first Stephen
Oh
King
my
book. And there were some scenes in there. I remember my sister even telling me, like, you shouldn't be reading this, and which made me want to read it more, right? That's how that kind of works.
Times have changed. Times have really
Absolutely.
changed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. But so, did you sort of write continuously as a creative writer, or did you go through a period where you stopped and then you found that joy again?
So in high school, I was more of an artist. I
Hmm.
focused on that more. In college, I took some journalism classes and started shifting to writing. My first job was actually in college. I wrote the obituaries for the for the city newspaper. So I kind of drifted in and out of fiction. Um, I pitched agents and publishers like everybody did. I published a few short stories, way back in the day when magazines and were still a thing. But all the through it all, I found myself editing friends and peers a lot, which kind of kept my foot in that. Even though I was, at some point I was working on in newspapers. I
Hmm.
worked for HP doing tech writing and stuff like that, but I always had my foot in the fiction realm too,
Hmm.
even if that meant just writers groups and editing friends. And then, 6, 7 years ago, I finally said, I've got to do this for a living. I don't necessarily make money from writing anymore, but instead I edit fiction and comics and things like that. So I finally kind of broken through, just not necessarily in the way I pictured as a kid.
Hmm. So what I'm really curious about is how you started developing an understanding of story as sort of like in an analytical way as an editor. Because what I find is that a lot of us who work in the book field, we're bookworms. I mean, that's very true of me. I was a complete book nerd as a kid. Um, so I love stories, but it took me a long time, I think, to shift my brain from just being immersed and enjoying it to then starting to ask, like, how is this working? So when
So,
did that shift happen for you?
it happened early, but I don't know if I noticed. I remember someone actually in a writers group in college told me that my feedback was really helpful. Um, and I started noticing that I recognize patterns, not like in a game sense, like I'm really terrible at pattern recognition as far as like a game or a puzzle.
Mhm,
Um, but for some reason, I can I can go watch a movie and think, oh, this is going to pay off later because this
mhm,
happened at the 20% mark, or
mhm, mhm,
I can instantly start to tell why I'm disengaging with the movie because of a lack of conflict or not understanding the
mm.
the core goal for the character, whatever it is. And I'm not sure I ever really pinpointed it until just even a couple of years ago, what makes me good at editing. But it's funny, my wife, sometimes she just kind of gets frustrating with me because I'll ruin a movie for her. Not by necessarily telling her how it's going to end, but because I'm always, even if I'm trying to turn my brain off, the
Hmm.
editor is always there. And it's hard for me not to vocalize something that's
Yeah.
off in a
Uh-oh.
movie I'm watching. I try to bite my tongue, but I can't always do it. So there's just something, I don't know if it's analytical or logic or pattern recognition, but there's something about at an early age, I just started recognizing what makes a good story and what doesn't. And don't
So,
get me wrong, I understand that like with art, it's opinion and all those things, but to some degree, there's a lot of elements that go into good storytelling, and there's some things that are kind of obvious when it's missing. And I for some reason, I'm just good at picking those things up.
okay, well let's get into it. I'm really excited to really get into the nitty gritty. What are some of the yeah, give me like what are the top three things maybe that you see that repeatedly in writers have off in stories?
So that's a kind of a challenge because it's a lot of the things I find are woven together, so it's kind of
Hmm.
hard to pull out just one thing.
Hmm.
But the heart of a story is a character. There's a goal, and then you introduce obstacles,
Hmm.
and that kind of that's just how a story develops.
Hmm.
A character moves toward a goal, and there's something in the way. One of the things I see most often is how easy it is for the protagonist, the hero, to get what they want. Uh, a
Mm.
lot of, especially in comics. No, that's not true. I think it's in prose too. Writers throw the obstacle at them. There's
Hmm.
action. There's fights. There's
Hmm.
mystery. Whatever it is.
Hmm.
But the hero gets what they want all the time.
Hmm.
They may have to work for it, but at the end of the scene, oh, I got the information. Oh, I won the thing. I got the gem. Now I can go add it to this other relic, and I'm gonna open this
Hmm.
temple or whatever. Um, so I think that a lot of writers have the plot points. They just miss the fact that it has to be more and more challenging for the hero, and there has to be setbacks. There has to be mistakes, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, but I know with you, you work with a lot of kids authors, kids
Hmm.
comic writers, and I would say for them, the thing I've noticed is the lack of agency in the
Mm.
kids. One thing I noticed when my son was, in elementary school, was just how little power he had. I mean, his teachers told him what to do, the librarians, mom and dad, coaches. I mean, to some degree, like he had no authority over anything.
Mhm,
And I think that kids gravitate, and adults too, obviously, but kids gravitate to those characters who are bigger than them, bigger than
mhm,
life,
mhm,
who whose actions and decisions directly impact their daily life.
mhm,
And I think with a lot of first drafts that I edit, sometimes the teachers step in and solve
mhm,
something too easily, or parents,
mhm,
or simply the action or the scene isn't big enough that the kids are directly responsible for what happens next. I
mhm.
think ultimately for kids authors, if I could share that one thing, give your characters more agency, that would be the thing I would kind of spread the word.
Yeah, yeah, I actually see that as well, so I would corroborate what you've just said.
Yeah, because
So
especially with kids books, they're more fantastical. They're bigger, right? These characters are like solving some crime.
mhm,
It's an 8-year-old solving some mystery in the neighborhood or whatever. Which is uh, in reality completely unlikely, but for
mhm,
kids, that's what they want to read. They want to see these kids solving something that directly impacts the school or their neighbors, and to read the drafts, they're all that's theirs, but it's kind of hidden. And suddenly a mom or dad steps in and solves something at
uh-huh.
the halfway points, and that removes the agency from the character.
Right, right. Another problem that I see sometimes, which is maybe interwoven with what we've just been talking about, is where the plot seems like it's there, but I don't emotionally connect with the character. So how do you help authors with that?
So I think that I try to get the writers to put themselves in their character's shoes, figure out what the character wants, what's motivating them. I think ultimately is you want your readers to relate to the character. Um, like in the Bone series, I've
Mhm,
never been cast out because my cousin ruined the election or whatever.
mhm,
I've never been on this quest to save this village, but I can relate because I understand what it's like to be friends and have a loved one do something that's underhanded or always getting us in trouble. I can relate to that.
mhm,
Uh, so I think that ultimately you look beyond the plot and start to try to figure out who this character is.
mhm,
And I think that this might sound kind of counterintuitive, but I think I see a lot of writers trying too hard. Like
mm,
they sit with these characters and they think and they jot down notes, and it's really almost more simple than that. It's just figuring out how you, as the writer, can relate to this and try to signify what that is to readers, how that character is going to draw them in.
mhm,
Because everybody's dealt with, uh, parents who don't understand or too strict teachers, things like that. And I think if you can draw that out and have that relatability, the readers will connect with that character a little bit more.
right, right. There is a paradox that I find sometimes in really good stories where sometimes it feels like the more specific the story is, the more universal it feels, you know? Like
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like it feels I'm just thinking of a specific story right now that I've been working on with a client that I really, really love, and it's set in a different country, in a very different environment, something that I know nothing about, and yet the emotional undercurrent is so powerful and it completely feels true to me, so therefore, even though it's so different, it does if I feel like this is speaking directly to me and my personal experience.
I love that. I love that. I think that to some degree, that's lightning in a bottle because that even some of my favorite movies and books don't quite hit you on that emotional level, right?
Mhm,
And that's probably why you're lighting up when you're talking about it because it's like,
mhm,
oh, this does something for me. This is written just for me. When in reality, the millions of people who are going to read that book are feeling the exact same way. I love that.
mhm, mhm. Yeah. So are there certain frameworks that you give authors or exercises that you give them to help
you,
improve?
so there's two things that I do, and they're both some. I'll be honest. Some writers push back. They're like, "Oh, you're crazy. I'm not going to do that. That's dumb." Uh, but the first one is when you're trying to get to know your character. I've found that instead of writing those character sheets,
Mhm,
how tall is what do they
mhm,
eat and
mhm,
all these
mhm,
things, that's fine, but that's kind of like the logical brain.
mhm,
I found that go give yourself 30 minutes and
uh-huh,
kind of get into like almost a meditative state. That sounds a little weird, but imagine yourself interviewing that character.
mm,
Figure out where that character goes, like if it's a kid at a park or maybe
mhm,
there's a bench where she likes to read, whatever. Go sit with your character and just start asking questions like you're a reporter. And it sounds silly, but like within a couple of minutes, this person will start to talk to you and you'll start to see insight that you hadn't planned with your logical brain as you're writing those questions in the little character sheet. And just kind of go with it. See where the character takes you. That character may share insight about something that happened to them before the story started that you weren't even ready to recognize.
mhm,
And I think what happens there is you start to see the character as a real person, and
mhm,
you start to see how you relate to that person and then how you can write those scenes
Mhm.
with more clarity. And hopefully it kind of gets to the point where you were just talking about how uh, you see yourself in this character, even though it's set in another world.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing I think I suggest is to figure out why you're writing this book. When for some reason, some writers just don't want to think about why am I writing this. But ultimately, I think it's like if I know what I hate to say the moral of the story,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
if you can kind of sit with yourself and figure out the themes that you are really powerful to you as a
Mhm.
writer, as a creator, just as a human,
Mhm.
knowing that helps you go back and weave in certain elements of that theme or develop certain scenes a certain way. And it's hard to pinpoint. It's hard to point to, but knowing why you're doing this and your ultimate goal, and I'm not talking about selling a million copies. I'm talking about
Mhm.
the goal as far as connecting with your audience, and the themes you're trying to convey, the relatability and things like that. If you know where your heart is, what you're trying to do with your characters and trying to bring to life in your story, that somehow makes everything easier, especially when you're rewriting and editing yourself. You can find ways to bring that to the surface more, and
Mhm.
things just start to become more powerful than if you didn't ask
Mhm.
yourself that at all.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
It just takes it from like a surface level story with you have all the plot points, you have all the beats, all that stuff can still be there but not resonate.
Uh-huh.
There's something about understanding what you're trying to say about the world through your story
Right.
that is absent until you recognize it and can weave that through.
Right. Right.
And that's a
Is
hard
that
don't get me wrong, that's a hard question to sit with, which is
Yeah.
probably why I get some pushback, but it is worth it.
Yeah, yeah. Does that e exercise help when, you have a story where there's a little bit too much of the, um, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened? Do you know that with that problem where it's basically just a series of things happening?
Yes, yes, so that's, so that's probably a third thing I suggest, the finding your why kinda helps with, again, it's cringeworthy, the moral of the story, but for that, one of the things like, you have all these plot points, but that doesn't create an organic story, it's almost feels episodic.
Right.
I think, for that, I think it was Pixar that I picked this up from. They have, their rules of storytelling.
Mhm.
Um, they have a because of that storyline. It's basically, something like, one day this happened because of that, and then there's just a blank.
Mhm.
Because of that, this happened, and because of that, this happened. It's a super you can easily find that online, but I think, it's a super simple exercise, but it ensures that because of that thing, that element of it ensures that this scene is connected to the next one, and
Right.
that whatever happens at the end of this scene, if it's forgotten in the next one, then that first scene could just be cut. Right?
Right.
And you don't wanna have a story that you can have pages and pages of comic book, for example, just cuts. That, there has to be something, from this scene has to lead into the next one.
Yeah.
Um, and that for some reason, it's a simple exercise, but that because of that plot point after plot point, really helps you see, uh, your story come to life. And you can do that. That's something that usually you will do as you're developing your story,
Mhm.
like just early stages of a synopsis, for example, but you can actually do that after you've developed it too, to ensure that these points are happening because of the previous one.
Right.
And essentially, if you can ever see a scene that doesn't lead into the next one, you just rewrite it or pull it all together.
Right. I think part of the reason I ask about it is because within the world of middle grade graphic novels, which is, probably where I spend 75% of my time or so as an agent, there's a lot of slice of life and memoir based stories, basically a lot of
Yeah.
authors who are taking their own childhood and kind of like, you know, shaping it a little bit into a story. And I find that it can sometimes be very hard if it's really based on your own life to see like a discrete story arc, you know, to
Yep.
form it into a story arc, I guess is what I'm saying.
So that I think that would add a couple of different wrinkles, right? Because you're a little closer to it. You're trying not to fictionalize it too much because you might feel like certain things have to be true without adding enhancing it in any way.
Mhm.
But I think the same could be true. It might not be quite as obvious as a mystery story, for
Mhm.
example, where there's clues that
Mhm.
take you
Mhm.
to this next plot point. But I think that they would be more impactful to see the impact of a certain scene might flow into the next one, um, almost on an emotional level, as opposed to uh, the plot points of like I said, a mystery. So
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, the question you asked about why are you writing this book, that to me, that seems like it would be extremely important in this particular case, because that would help.
absolutely. So yeah, if you see I would think that someone who's writing something autobiographical or even a fictional account of something that
Mhm.
was true,
Mhm.
they would want to weave that in and
Mhm.
start planting that seed early and show their 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 own character growth. And you kind of plant the seed here. This is where I learned this, and this is the first time I tried to accept it. Or I mean, I'm making this up as I go, obviously, but if you can start to see those narrative links, that you can start to enhance each of those scenes. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that each scene needs to connect to those themes, obviously, because if
Right.
the next thing you know, you feel like you're beating the reader over the head. Hey, everybody, here's the theme I'm trying to tell you. You don't want to do that either. It's more subtle than that. But understanding your why for sure would anything more autobiographical.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the Kickstarter that you're doing right now.
All right, so it's a book. So I've learned. Okay, let me back up already.
Okay.
I was working in corporate America as a writer slash editor for years, and I finally quit my job to edit fiction and comics full time. Right. Um, Over time, I started. I mentioned earlier that I recognize patterns almost instantly. I started recognizing the same problems creep into these stories,
Mhm.
and I started making notes. I had a seminar or two just to kind of share some of that knowledge. But then I decided it's time to just write it all down and share it with as many people as I can. So I just got the proof copy a couple of days
Whoa.
ago. Um, it's funny. I did the proof, like I spent like 14 hours reading it word for word, making sure it's proofread. And I'm at the point now I kind of don't want to read it ever again. I've read it like 40 times now, and I'm over it. I want everybody else to read it. But one of the things I've noticed about me is I don't want to teach people how to write. I want to teach them to recognize some of their own weaknesses, some of their blind spots. I want to help people recognize how to improve what they've already written, basically. So this is basically half the book is talking about the common storytelling problems I've
Mhm.
seen and how to fix them. And then the other half is walking them through the editorial process to help them see the steps that you have to take as a writer to edit your own work.
Mhm.
I've encountered a lot of writers who, I hate to say it, but some writers come to me and they're like, "Oh, I just thought I wrote it and printed." Like I read it once or I let my a friend read it and that was all I needed.
Mhm.
And that's why some of the independent self-published comics aren't as good as they could be, that
Mhm.
they're not giving the a lot of writers who like kickstart some books, they're super excited about their idea, they share it with the world, but they don't get a lot of positive feedback.
Mhm.
This is kind of hoping to elevate everything and help you get the feedback that you want and word of mouth and things like that. So
Is it possible for you to give an maybe anonymize a bit, but give a specific anecdote of a story that came to you from an author that it was in a certain state and then you helped them get it to a very different state. Can you kind of describe an example like that?
So, I just mentioned some writers come to me, almost looking for someone to just say, "Oh, this is great," and change the character name. I had one creator work with me, and she was willing to. It took her years of editing and rewriting and revising. Uh, I pointed out some of the things I've already discussed, like, making it too easy on the character or
Mhm.
the lack of agency, things like that. Her ideas, the world building, the character, the action, it was kind of already there. It was just I was able to point out some of the things keeping it from being a great story.
Mhm, mhm.
And she worked at it. She worked at it, and it was published earlier this year. So she put in crazy amounts of effort, and she didn't want to self-publish, so she kept at it.
About and the fact that you said it took her years, I'm glad that you said that because I do not blink an eye at that at all. I mean, that's actually par for the course, I would say.
Yeah, you've seen it from both sides of the table,
Oh,
right? So
yeah, 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 yeah. So I think people who expect it to take, "I'm gonna write my first draft and I'll be ready to publish next month." I mean, you can do that technically, but it's rarely gonna be, like you said, as polished and as impactful of a story as it could be. And one other thing I just wanted to touch on a little bit is that within the world of traditional publishing, I feel like editors don't have the ability to edit very much anymore, just because everybody's doing the work of 5 different jobs and
right.
I feel like editors at publishers these days are almost more project managers than they are editors.
Yeah.
Um, and to me, editors are the unsung heroes in the industry. They Having a good editor can do amazing things to your
Yeah, I
work.
think that, a lot of writers don't really understand the role of the editor. That's part of it. I think we're in the age where of pretty much instant gratification. We need
Mhm.
to, uh, if you're gonna make yourself an author, a known, a recognizable name, you need to publish, and you need to publish fast and often. Um, so it's a challenge to sit back, I think, and recognize all the work that you have to put into it. And honestly, I think, whenever I hear someone say like that, like you just did, that editors are more project managers now, it kind of breaks my heart a little because well, I mean, I'm an editor, so that's
Mhm.
part of it, obviously, but
Mhm.
uh, I just know how valuable they are, not only in improving the manuscript, but helping writers with their next manuscript. By you learn with this one, your next one's going to be better, and the next one's going to be better after that, and you can't just learn that on your own. You don't
Mhm.
just. I think. I think it's fairly common knowledge that if you write a book, your next one's just gonna be better just because you've gone through the process.
Right.
But that's only taking you so far. I think having someone to kinda guide you and show you some of the things that you're not seeing and how to make your characters come to life or your world building,
Mhm.
stronger, um, that's not something that you're just gonna see because you wrote a second book. Someone needs to
Right.
point that out, and
Yeah.
beta readers, I love beta readers,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
they're your friends probably and your
Mhm.
family,
Mhm.
and they're not gonna criti ugh, I don't wanna say criticize, they're not gonna critique you in the way
Mhm.
that's gonna be
Right.
valuable as a learning tool, so and
Right.
that's where
Right.
editors come in, or a good editor at least, so
Right. I mean, the analogy just occurred to me that it would be kind of like trying to be an athlete and having no coach at all.
yeah, that's true, yeah. You can have innate ability, but that's only
Uh-huh.
gonna take you so far without
Right, right, and a
someone
coach
to
can do
kinda guide
so
you.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, it's just kind of the way our world is structured right now, but it's too bad because I see a lot of I don't think a single bad idea has crossed my desk. That's not
Mhm.
how it works.
Mhm.
If you're gonna write a comic or a novel, you usually have good ideas, you have good characters, you have a good couple of plot points, the ending is whatever it is, it's already there. It just doesn't come together. It
Hmm.
doesn't form a complete story or something that's truly engaging. Um, and it kind of I when you go to a convention, and sometimes I'll go buy some independent comics, or
Hmm.
you have books come across your desk, and I'm assuming you're kind of similar, where you're like, "Oh, this is so close, but I wish this person had spent just a little bit more time, or had
Hmm.
someone help develop it with them, or whatever it is."
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I don't know. I wish everybody had an editor to work with them and
Yeah.
help guide them.
Well, now they can buy your book as a first step.
It's funny. I've given this book to friends, strangers, and you mentioned earlier. You said that that book was written for you.
Uh-huh.
I've had 3 people send me emails with that almost direct quote from each of them, and they don't know each other, and they said it's almost as if you wrote this book for me,
Mhm.
which kind of lights me up, which tells me that something in here triggered something for them to recognize something in their own storytelling. Um, And that's the whole point of the book, really, is to help you. It's 200 pages, and there's hundreds of tips in here, and they all weave together. And I honestly think that even if you found 10 things or 4
Right.
things in here that helped elevate, and the way that they're all connected, I don't know. I'm not trying to hype my book up, or maybe I am. I don't
Well,
know
you
this,
should be. You should
but
be.
I
That's
really
that's
do
my
think
job
that
is
this will
to
help a lot of writers.
help you hype your book.
It's it's funny. It's weird. Like we talked about the athlete just a second ago who's maybe has some innate ability. It's kind of weird. I know that you're a big fan of promoting yourself and helping creators promote their books and things. This stuff comes so naturally for me. It almost feels like the stuff I share isn't valuable. Does that? I don't know if that
Right.
makes
Oh,
sense,
no,
but
it
like,
does make sense to me, yeah. When you're really good at it, you feel like it doesn't yeah, I completely get it. But that is such a mistaken way to see things. I sometimes have the same problem, but yes, I know what you mean.
yeah, 'cause I picture you as just having all this knowledge from experience and just your interests, and I can almost see you kind of similar in that, well, everybody knows this because you know it
Mhm.
so well, and the
Right,
people you
right,
probably
right,
talk to on a regular basis know it really well. It's
right.
like, "Oh, yeah, everybody does," but then you share it with others, and they're like, "Oh, I never knew this," and you're
Yeah,
like, "Oh, that's interesting." Somebody not everybody has the same, experience you do, so, uh
yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna learn from your book because I I have been an editor, and as an agent, I do some editing, but I don't I don't consider that my genius zone. I mean, yeah, so I'm always eager to learn. That's part of why I asked you, like, whether you had sort of a light bulb moment, but it seems like for you, it was kind of an innate thing. So actually, I have to ask you though, did you ever have like a coach type person in your life who helped you become a better writer slash editor?
so I've been lucky, so it's weird. I My instinct is to say no, because I've never had one person who came to me as a coach,
Mhm.
but I've been lucky enough to have plenty of editors back me and show me how to edit others and how to write for myself.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, now that I've had probably 10 or 12 different coaches, even though that their role wasn't that.
Mhm.
People who would sit with me, and so even as an editor, uh,
Mhm.
I would edit an article for a newspaper, for example, and turn that in. An editor would point out, "Hey, I noticed you edited this. Another way to edit this would be this," or whatever. So I've kind of had guides as far as editing goes, but I've also had guides with my own writing, and kind of like you're on both sides. You understand what it's like to be the creator. You understand what it's like to be the businessman. I'm on both sides too. So I think that's another thing that I bring to the table is that I understand how hard it is to be edited by someone,
Mhm.
and you put
Mhm.
hard into this for months, if not years, and then suddenly some stranger is gonna come in and redline it and mark everything.
Mhm.
I mean, I just shared, I edited a novel with over 2,000 comments.
Mhm.
Is I mean, I had to cushion that a little bit and say, "Hey, trust me, we're on the same team here." And
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
I already forgot where I'm going with that, but, uh, I think part of that is understanding, like, almost like a doctor's bedside manner. I
Yeah.
understand how hard it is to be edited, so I go into it almost as a learning tool and
Mhm.
try to guide writers more than I just come in and say, "Here's all these things you need to fix." It's not like that. It's more, I understand.
So true. Yeah. People talk about the what is it, the critique sandwich or something like that. Um, but I actually this is reminding me of a conversation I had with a very well-known graphic novelist who was talking about how when he's edited, uh, he still needs a little pat on the back, like, he needs them to say, like, "Great work," like, "You made so much progress, and now here's everything that we need to work on."
Right, yeah, exactly.
Like, it's hard work, and we need encouragement almost as much as we need the tips on how to improve.
That's interesting that you say that too, because one of the hard so it's writers, maybe this is all creators, but you can read your script today and think, "Oh, this is Eisner worthy. I am gonna blow up. Everyone's gonna love me." And then you read that same scene the next day and you're like, "Oh, I'm a hack. I should take up knitting," or whatever. I think part of that is we're taught to see our weaknesses, which is great.
Mhm,
You can learn.
mhm,
But one of the things that I try to do as an editor and also in this book is you have to be aware of the things you're good at.
mhm,
If you're really good at dialogue, for
mhm,
example, maybe you kind of lean into that and you
mhm,
have a dialogue heavy script or a
mhm,
dialogue heavy novel.
mhm,
I remember growing up reading, I think it was Elmore Leonard. His books were almost all dialogue.
mhm,
So I guess that's just to point out that be you, figure out who you are as a writer, understand your why, going back to that, but also your strengths and weaknesses. And once you start to see some of your weaknesses, they're no longer blind spots. You can
mhm.
overcome those,
Yeah.
but also embrace the fact that, hey, I'm really good at this. I'm really good at visual storytelling. That's why I chose comics. And I'm
Mhm,
going to have pages of pages with no dialogue if
mhm.
that's your thing, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I always go back to is you can read all the books, you can work with editors, you can take all the seminars, but ultimately a story works or it doesn't. There's no there's no roadmap, there's no recipe. So figure
Mhm.
out what you like to do, what you're good at, and let that kind of shine through, I think.
Wow. Well, that's a great note to sort of wrap things up. I do wanna ask, though, how should people connect with you? How can they support the book on Kickstarter? Tell me details about that.
So my website is jamespowellediting.com. I'm also on Substack. I have a weekly email called the Fiction Coach. It basically, my goal is just to pinpoint common problems I see in the manuscripts, both for novelists and comic writers. Those are the easiest ways to get a hold of me. I do have a Kickstarter starting July 28th that runs through August 22nd, I think, for the book. Uh, but yeah, that's me. I think I'm on the Fiction Coach, that Substack, pretty frequently. I think that's probably the easiest way. Subscribe or reach out, or shoot me an email on jamespowellediting.com.
Okay, so if people go to Kickstarter, it's self-editing for comics, is that the title of the book?
Self-editing for comic book writers.
Self-editing, so if they go to Kickstarter, they search self-editing for comic book
Yep,
writers. That's how they're
exactly.
gonna
So it's
find
funny,
it.
I know that's the come on, that's not a very catchy name, it's not very fun, but, like, ultimately, I wanted a title that told you exactly what you get, so
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah.
and as far as marketing, I heard that that's probably good for SEO. I'm not I'm not good at marketing, but you are, so
I think being straightforward and clear is always a good way
yeah,
to go.
exactly.
All right, James, it was so great talking to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, this was fun.